HOA. The people who run our neighborhood just made a huge mistake. They stole money from my 82-year-old grandfather. Now they want to take his house. They thought they were picking on a confused old man. What they didn't know. They just started a fight with his granddaughter. And I know how to find bad guys on computers for a living. Opening. Every dirty trick they pulled left clues. And they have no idea I know exactly how to follow those clues. They started a war with the wrong family. Drop a comment if you've ever dealt with mean neighborhood rule people. What I'm about to show you will shock you. My name is Alex. I'm 34 years old. Before this mess started, I thought the biggest dangers to my family came from bad guys far away. I never thought the real danger would come from the fancy people living just 3 streets over. Life hit me hard recently. My husband left me when I wasn't expecting it. I felt lost and broke. Moving back in with my grandfather Walter was supposed to help me get back on my feet. I wanted to be close to the only father I ever really knew. Walter has lived in the same house in Willow Creek for over 40 years. Back then, it was just regular working families. People borrowed sugar from each other. They helped fix cars. It felt like a real community. Walter's house sits on a corner. But the real treasure is his huge vegetable garden in the backyard. This garden is amazing. We're talking tomatoes as big as softballs. Cucumbers that could feed a whole family. Fresh herbs that smell incredible. My grandfather has magic hands when it comes to growing things. Every morning you could hear his old boots crunching on fallen leaves as he walked around checking his plants. He'd carry his coffee mug and inspect everything like a proud father. This garden wasn't just a hobby. It was his safe place. His way to remember my grandmother Eleanor. They planted the first seeds together the day they moved in, but around 2019, everything changed. Rich people started moving in. They tore down normal houses and built huge fancy ones. Regular pickup trucks got replaced with expensive SUVs that never got dirty. And with these new people came Margaret Blackwood. Everyone calls her Margot. Margot sells expensive houses. She talks about protecting house values like a preacher talks about going to heaven. She's 52 years old with blonde hair that probably costs more than my car payment. Her smile is so fake it makes you want to check your wallet. She bought the biggest new house on Maple Street. Then she started trying to change everything about our neighborhood. We need rules, she'd say at her fancy coffee meetings on her perfect lawn. We have to protect our money from bad things happening to house prices. 6 months after she moved in, something terrible happened. Willow Creek got its first ever group that makes neighborhood rules. We call it an HOA. The vote was sneaky and mean. They planned it during a huge snowstorm right before Thanksgiving. Most of the older people who'd lived here forever couldn't drive in the snow or were visiting family. But the vote passed. Just like that, Margot became the president of this new group. Now she had power to give fines and make life miserable for anyone who didn't follow her idea of a perfect neighborhood. The first attack on my grandfather came because of his garden. A fancy letter with a shiny logo showed up in his mailbox. It said his 40-year-old vegetable garden was against the rules. They wanted him to pay $500 as punishment. When Walter showed me that letter, I felt so angry I could taste metal in my mouth. This garden was Walter's whole life. It was how he talked to God. It was how he remembered Grandma. Every summer, he shared his vegetables with all the neighborhood kids. But Margot wasn't done being cruel. The next letter was even worse. She said Walter had to tear down his wheelchair ramp, the one he built himself in 2018 after he had a small stroke. According to the HOA, the ramp was ugly and made the neighborhood look bad. That ramp meant everything to Walter. He wouldn't let anyone help him build it. For 3 weeks, he worked in his garage, measuring and cutting and hammering every board. I was far away working, but he called me so proud to tell me about his finished ramp. Now they wanted to destroy it. Walter showed me that second letter. His hands were shaking more than usual. His voice was almost a whisper. Maybe they're right. Alex, this neighborhood is changing. Maybe I'm just too old to keep up. That's when I understood. This wasn't really about gardens or ramps. This was a mean plan to push out all the old people who'd lived here forever. They wanted to make room for Margot's expensive, perfect neighborhood. Dream. I was not going to let that happen. 2 weeks after I moved back home, Margot made her next move. This time she went after Walter's pride and joy. His 1970 Ford truck. That truck was more than just a way to get around. It was part of who Walter was. A classic blue workhorse with more personality than any fancy car. Its dented back had carried wood to build half the porches in the neighborhood. It delivered Christmas trees to families who couldn't buy one. It helped people move when they needed it. The big red toolbox in the back had helped build tree houses and fix leaky sinks. That truck probably saved more marriages than most counselors. But now, because of Margot's new rules about cars, Walter's beloved truck was suddenly called a work vehicle being stored where it shouldn't be. The punishment? 200 every single day, until he moved it away from his house. I watched from the kitchen window as Margot walked around the truck with her phone, taking pictures from every angle like she was documenting a crime. The familiar rumble of the truck starting up, mixed with the smell of fresh-cut grass as Walter, not knowing what was happening, started the engine like he had for 40 years. That evening, Margot posted those photos on the neighborhood Facebook page. Her message was designed to make people angry. Neighbors of Willow Creek, this is what happens when we don't enforce our community rules. Our house values are everyone's responsibility. Let's protect our investment. She got the new residents all worked up about house prices going down. Suddenly, my grandfather's historic truck was enemy number one. Mean comments filled the post. What an eyesore. One new person wrote. My customers would never buy here if they saw that rusty junk, said another. But here's the thing about fighting people who think they're smarter than everyone else. They usually don't think much of the people they're fighting. While Margot was busy playing social media games, I was doing what I do best, digging through computer files and legal records. When groups like HOAs get started, there are strict rules they have to follow. Every state has laws about how they must be created. I pulled up all the paperwork, the legal documents, the voting records from that snowy November day, and all the permission slips. What I found was straight-up cheating. Only 40% of people who could vote actually voted to start the HOA. State law said they needed 51% of everyone to make it legal. Margot had filled the gap using permission slips from snowbirds, people who live here part-time and were in Florida or Arizona when the vote happened. But here was the smoking gun. Those permission signatures were electronic, supposedly submitted through a secure website. The computer information on those signature files was proof they were lying. They were all created on the same computer from the same internet connection, traced to a coffee shop 2 towns away. All made within 6 hours, 3 days after the meeting had already happened. I carefully documented every single lie, put it all together into an official complaint, and filed it with the state board that watches over HOAs. Knowledge tip 1. An HOA's power isn't unlimited. To start one legally requires strict following of state law, including majority approval from all people who can vote. Always check that voting records and permission slips are real. Margot's response was fast and predictable. Within 48 hours, Walter got another letter. This one was dripping with fake authority. It said he never paid a mandatory one-time HOA fee of $2,000. The bill was backdated to 2019. To my horror, it included what looked like Walter's electronic signature on a payment form he swore he'd never seen. Walter stared at the signature on my laptop screen. His weathered face showed confusion and fear. "Alex, I've never signed anything on a computer in my life. I wouldn't even know how to do that." That's when the first scary pieces of a much bigger, more evil puzzle started falling into place. Someone hadn't just been bothering my grandfather. They had been stealing his computer identity, and I was about to find out just how deep this mess went. Margot's next attack was disguised as caring about safety. Someone anonymously complained to the HOA about Walter's roof being dangerous. This triggered an immediate demand for a professional roof inspection, costing $1,500 to be done within 30 days. The punishment for not doing it, $500 every day. The whole thing smelled like a setup from the moment Margot showed up with her chosen inspector. He was a sketchy man in a wrinkled shirt who spent more time looking at his phone than at the actual roof. "Excuse me," I said, standing in the driveway with my arms crossed, blocking his path. "I need to see your credentials." He looked nervous, patting his pockets before fumbling around in his beat-up truck. He finally pulled out a cheap business card that looked like it was printed at a gas station. Blackwood Inspection Services. The same last name as Margot. What a shocking coincidence. "And your state license number?" I pressed. More fumbling. His confidence was disappearing fast. "I'm, still waiting for the new license to come through from the state. A renewal thing." I pulled out my phone, my face showing I meant business. Right there in front of him, I called the State Contractor Licensing Board. 2 minutes and a very helpful state worker later, I had my answer. No company called Blackwood Inspection Services was registered in the state. No license application was on file under his name. And doing inspection work for money without a license was a serious crime. I watched with satisfaction as he packed up his fake clipboard and slunk back to his truck. Defeated. By the end of the week, I had hired a real, licensed and insured building engineer. He spent 3 hours checking the property and gave Walter's roof perfect marks. The house was as solid as the day it was built, which wasn't surprising since Walter had helped pour the foundation himself back in 1983. But Margot was a master of changing tactics. Faster than a politician during election season, she abandoned the roof story and immediately made up a pest control emergency. She claimed Walter's compost pile was attracting rats. A new HOA letter arrived. This one had blurry photos of what they said was a rat problem caused by unsafe conditions on Walter's property. There was just one problem. The photos were obviously fake stock images downloaded from the internet. I could literally see the watermark from a photography website in the corner of one picture. Walter's compost pile smelled exactly like it should. A healthy mix of coffee grounds, vegetable peels, and the sweet promise of next year's garden. The only rats in this neighborhood were the 2-legged kind. The fine for this imaginary rat problem? A cool $5,000. That's when our first ally showed up. Evelyn Patterson, a 78-year-old retired schoolteacher from down the street, knocked on Walter's door. Evelyn was the kind of woman who noticed everything and forgot nothing. She carried a thick manila folder. "Alex, honey," she said, settling into a chair at Walter's kitchen table, her eyes sharp and smart. "I've been writing down every single thing that woman has done to the seniors in this neighborhood for the past 6 months. What's happening to Walter is just the tip of the iceberg." Evelyn opened her folder and a clear, disturbing pattern emerged. She had put together a file of systematic bullying targeting the community's elderly residents. The Johnsons on Pine Street had been hit with the same fake roof inspection scam. The Washingtons, a couple in their 80s, got identical pest control. tickets for their bird feeder. Every single case involved seniors who lived alone, had limited family support, and weren't comfortable with modern computers. Knowledge tip 2. When an HOA demands costly inspections or repairs, always demand the contractor's state license number and proof of insurance. This information is public record and can be easily checked through state-run websites. But as Evelyn talked, another more sinister pattern began to surface. Every single targeted senior had mentioned the same thing. A very helpful young man from the HOA had recently visited them, offering free help with setting up online banking and computer security systems to make paying dues easier. The same young man who had helped my grandfather just 2 months before I came back home. Margot's third major attack targeted Walter's solar panels, a system he'd proudly installed in 2015 to cut his electric bill and help the environment. Suddenly, these panels were reclassified as unauthorized utility connections that had to be removed immediately because they hadn't been pre-approved by the Architectural Review Committee. Never mind that the Architectural Review Committee didn't exist in 2015. Never mind that Walter had a thick folder of proper city permits and signed approvals from the electric company. Margot's letter was clear. The panels had to come down within 30 days with escalating fines of $1,000 per day for non-compliance. The gentle, almost silent hum of the solar panel inverters had become the soundtrack of Walter's mornings. A clean electrical sound that represented his independence and forward-thinking spirit. Now Margot wanted to silence it. I pulled the original installation permits, took pictures of every official stamp and signature, and documented the complete timeline. The panels were 100% legal, properly installed and protected under any new regulations. But then Margot played her trump card. She got her cousin, a mid-level manager in the City Code Enforcement Office, to issue a formal violation notice for the exact same panels that had passed a city inspection with flying colors 7 years earlier. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just a case of bullying. This was coordinated corruption with tentacles, reaching directly into our local city government. Margot's real estate company stood to gain significant money every time an elderly resident was harassed into selling their home. And she had family members positioned in key agencies to help her make it happen. While I was building our legal defense, I began tracking the HOA's money movements. Publicly available records showed some interesting patterns. Every time an elderly resident paid a large fine or was forced to sell their house, the HOA made large consulting payments to a shell company called Blackwood Development Group LLC. 3. Guesses who owned it? The real bombshell, however, came when Walter showed me his latest bank statement. $8,000 in retroactive monthly HOA fees dating back to 2019 had been automatically taken from his checking account. The HOA had payment records showing Walter had agreed to these electronic withdrawals, complete with digital authorizations he swore he had never made. Walter's hands shook as he pointed to the withdrawal dates on the statement. Alex, I've never authorized an automatic payment in my life. I don't trust computers with my money. I pay my bills with checks. The pattern was now terrifyingly clear. Someone with direct access to Walter's banking information and his computer identity was systematically draining the accounts of elderly residents while building a fake paper trail of authorizations to cover their tracks. Though every illegal transaction showed the same digital signature, was routed through the same internet connection, and had timestamps clustering around late Friday afternoons and weekends, times when banks were closed, and transaction confirmations wouldn't be processed or noticed until Monday morning. Knowledge tip 3. HOA rules and fees cannot be applied retroactively to pre-existing installations or improvements. Any attempt to do so is legally invalid and a potential sign of fraudulent activity. That night, I sat in Walter's basement office, the room lit only by the blue glow of my 3 computer monitors. The air smelled of old electronics and dust. Evelyn Patterson's words echoed in my head, about the helpful young man who had spent an hour with Walter setting up his online banking and installing special security software to protect him from hackers. Was beginning to suspect that the biggest security threat wasn't an outside hacker trying to get in. It was the helpful insider who was already there. It was time to find out exactly what kind of help my grandfather had received. The malware was elegant. I had to give them that. It was a beautifully crafted computer virus hidden deep within Walter's computer system and cleverly disguised as legitimate HOA compliant software. It was a keylogger, capturing every password, every bank transaction, and every digital signature Walter made. I found it buried in a folder labeled Willow Creek Suite, installed 3 months prior by someone with full administrator access to Walter's computer. The installation log was precise. It happened on a Saturday afternoon, the exact day Walter had received help from that charming, helpful young man from the HOA. This was no amateur operation. The malware was sophisticated and evil. It not only captured banking credentials and copied digital signature files, but was also programmed to take periodic screenshots during sensitive online transactions. Every single piece of Walter's digital life had been compromised and stolen. The computer information from the malware's command and control server led me to its source. Tyler Blackwood, age 24. Margot Blackwood's son. According to his polished social media profiles, he was a self-employed cybersecurity consultant who specialized in senior citizen online protection services. Tyler had been making house calls throughout Willow Creek Estates, offering his free computer help to the neighborhood's elderly residents. What he was actually doing was installing a digital crowbar that gave him complete access to their financial lives. I began to trace the digital footprints, and they spread like a virus across 3 counties. I uncovered a network affecting at least 47 seniors. The total amount stolen, as far as I could calculate, was over $380,000. Every victim told the same story. A helpful young man, a free computer setup, mysterious bank withdrawals, and a sudden flood of HOA harassment that coincidentally began right after the new security software was installed. Walter sat in his worn kitchen chair, staring at the printouts of evidence I had spread across the table. The relief in his voice was heartbreaking. So I'm not losing my mind. I really didn't authorize those payments. No, Grandpa, I said, my hand on his shoulder. You've been the victim of a very sophisticated and cruel scam, one that was designed to make you think you were forgetting things. Evelyn Patterson had tears in her eyes when I showed her the findings. Tyler had helped her too, installing the same malware on her laptop and gaining access to her modest retired teacher's pension. This was so much bigger than HOA harassment. This was systematic predatory elder fraud, using the HOA as a weapon and a cover story. Margot's real estate company had already acquired 12 homes from delinquent HOA members who couldn't keep up with the escalating fines and mysterious bank withdrawals. The pattern was surgical in its precision. Target elderly residents who lived alone, compromise their computer security, drain their bank accounts through fraudulent HOA fees and backdated charges, and then when they were financially and emotionally broken, forced them to sell their homes at below market prices directly to Margot's company. Knowledge tip 4. Never allow a stranger, especially one with a vested interest, to install software on your personal computer. Legitimate security software comes from established, reputable companies, not from door-to-door service providers offering free help. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a surge of adrenaline, not of anger, but of purpose. Cybersecurity expertise wasn't just useful anymore. It was the key that would unravel this entire criminal operation. But I couldn't do it alone. Taking down a network this sophisticated and corrupt would require more than just digital evidence. I needed a team of allies who understood financial crimes, elder abuse law, and the power of public exposure. It was time to assemble my own task force and turn the tables on Margot Blackwood's suburban empire. Building a strong case against an organized elder fraud ring requires the right team. I was lucky. My time in the military and consulting had connected me with people who specialized in exactly this kind of fight. Evelyn Patterson became my director of human intelligence. At 78 years old, with the sharp investigative instincts of a seasoned detective, she had already done months of groundwork. Her weekly coffee meetings with the neighborhood seniors transformed into unofficial intelligence briefings, where victims shared their stories and, under her guidance, began collecting their own evidence. Detective Ray Kowalski was a former colleague from my cybersecurity consulting days who had left the private sector for the financial crimes division of the state police. Ray had been tracking desperate elder fraud networks across the state. He was thrilled and disturbed to find a case with such a clear, centralized digital evidence trail. "Alex, what you've uncovered here is bigger than just your neighborhood," Ray explained, his pen flying across his notepad as we met at a diner far from Willow Creek. "This pattern of malware and HOA pressure matches reports we've been getting from suburban communities across 3 counties. Tyler and Margot aren't working alone. They're part of a franchise. Marcus Webb was our legal powerhouse, a fierce civil rights attorney who specialized in elder abuse cases and, more importantly, RICO violations. When I laid out the evidence, the coordinated action, the shell companies, the wire fraud, his eyes lit up like it was Christmas morning. "This isn't just fraud, Alex. This is racketeering," he said, the smell of fresh legal documents and brewing coffee filling his office. "We're looking at organized criminal activity using a legitimate-seeming entity, the HOA, as a front. We can go after them under federal law. That means asset forfeiture and triple damages." Jennifer Santos, a sharp, tenacious investigative journalist for the local TV station, completed our team. Jennifer had been reporting on HOA abuse stories for years and knew exactly how to time media exposure with legal action for maximum impact and public protection. Our strategy was a 3-pronged assault. 1. Legal action, a massive civil lawsuit, and coordination with law enforcement to stop the fraud, recover every stolen dollar, and dismantle the organization. 2. Media exposure, a carefully timed investigative report to expose the scam, protecting other potential victims across the state. 3. Law enforcement, a coordinated takedown with state and federal agencies to ensure the criminal charges would stick. Marcus explained, "Our legal leverage. Pattern evidence in fraud cases like this is incredibly powerful. Instead of 47 individual cases, we're framing this as a single criminal conspiracy. The RICO statute allows us to sue for triple the actual damages plus all attorney fees." Ray outlined the digital forensics. Every electronic transaction leaves metadata. Tyler's malware, in its arrogance, kept detailed logs of every keystroke, every password, every bank transfer. He essentially created a perfect time-stamped confession of his own crimes. Jennifer planned the media rollout. We hold the story until the arrest warrants are served. The moment they're in custody, we air the investigation. The public exposure of the scam will be immense, protecting countless other seniors from falling victim to similar operations. Knowledge tip 5. Elder fraud protection starts with education. Never give remote computer access to a stranger. Always independently verify financial transactions with your bank, and report any suspicious activity immediately to both local police and your state's elder abuse hotline. Our technical plan was elegantly simple. We would allow Tyler and Margot to continue their operation, all while we documented everything in the background. We would spring the trap only when we had irrefutable evidence of ongoing criminal activity. Evelyn organized a senior cybersecurity education session at the local library, a brilliant cover for teaching the other victims how to recognize and report the fraud attempts. 23 elderly neighbors showed up, many carrying laptops that the helpful Tyler had worked on. Every single one was infected with the same keylogging malware. Marcus began preparing the civil asset forfeiture paperwork, targeting Margot's real estate company accounts, her home, her cars, and every asset purchased with the proceeds of their. Crimes.Ray coordinated with federal financial crimes investigators, linking our local case to the broader interstate fraud patterns. This was no longer just about Willow Creek Estates. It was about protecting elderly communities everywhere. Our greatest weapon, however, was Margot and Tyler's own arrogance. We let them think they were winning. The best way to catch criminals is to give them enough rope to hang themselves. We were about to find out just how much rope they needed. Margot must have sensed that the ground was shifting beneath her feet, because she accelerated her timeline with the wild desperation of a gambler, doubling down on a losing hand. The HOA called a sudden emergency meeting and, with only her cronies present, voted to foreclose on Walter's house within 72 hours. Never mind that illegal. Foreclosure requires months of due process. Margot invoked non-existent emergency provisions in the bylaws, citing imminent health and safety violations. The proof for these violations materialized the very next morning. The faint ozone smell of an electrical arc filled Walter's kitchen. Tyler had paid a visit during the night, under the pretense of inspecting the exterior electrical meter. In reality, he had sabotaged the main electrical panel. I watched it all on the high-definition security cameras I had installed the week before. Tyler's face was clearly visible in the infrared light, as he deliberately loosened critical wires, creating the very fire hazard the HOA would later use as justification for their emergency condemnation. But Tyler wasn't done. I watched from Walter's living room window as he made his rounds, heading directly for Evelyn Patterson's house, laptop bag in hand, likely planning to install an updated, more aggressive version of his malware. He never saw me coming. Tyler Blackwood, I presume. I stepped out from behind Evelyn's perfectly manicured gardenia bushes as he approached her back door. He nearly dropped his expensive laptop. I'm sorry. Do I know you? Oh, we're about to get very well acquainted, I said, my voice calm, but cold. I'm Alex Morgan, Walter Miller's granddaughter. I've been so looking forward to meeting the young man who's been so helpful with our neighborhood's computer security. Tyler's face cycled through several shades of pale as the realization hit him. I'm just here to help Mrs. Patterson with some software updates. The same kind of software updates you installed on my grandfather's computer. I took a step closer. The ones that log every keystroke and bank password. Right on cue, Evelyn Patterson opened her back door. Tyler, dear, I've been expecting you, but I'm afraid I won't be needing your computer help today, or ever again. The acrid smell of nervous sweat mixed with the morning dew as Tyler understood his entire operation had been exposed. He stammered, trying to play it off as a misunderstanding, but the laptop bag full of malware-loaded USB drives told the real story. Meanwhile, Margot was pulling her last strings of corrupt influence. The city inspector, her cousin, showed up at Walter's house with an official condemnation notice, declaring the property uninhabitable due to severe electrical hazards. The same hazards Tyler had created less than 12 hours earlier. But here's the beauty of a coordinated plan. Detective Ray was already positioned across the street in an unmarked car, documenting every step of the corruption chain. He had photos, video, and audio recordings of the entire exchange, proving the collusion between the HOA, the city official, and the fraud operation. Knowledge tip 6. You can legally install security cameras on your own property without providing notice. They are one of the most effective non-confrontational tools for documenting harassment, trespassing, and other criminal activity. That afternoon, Margot, in a final act of arrogance, attempted to intimidate other elderly residents into silence. She went door to door, spinning a tale about Walter's criminal granddaughter who was committing elder abuse by questioning his financial decisions and isolating him. She had no idea that half the neighbors she spoke to were wearing miniature recording devices provided by Detective Ray, capturing every word of her witness intimidation campaign. My evidence package was now complete. We had them on systematic fraud, felony elder abuse, federal computer crimes, racketeering, and now witness intimidation. The only question left was whether to arrest them immediately or let them dig their hole just a little bit deeper. I chose deeper. Sometimes the most satisfying way to catch a criminal is to let them march triumphantly to their own execution. Margot's final gambit was as predictable as it was pathetic. She filed for an emergency restraining order against me, claiming I was the one elder abusing Walter. According to her sworn petition, I was an unstable, recently divorced military contractor who had forcibly moved in with my grandfather to seize control of his finances and isolate him from his concerned community. The restraining order sought to legally prevent me from accessing Walter's bank accounts, speaking to him about his finances, or attending any HOA meetings. Simultaneously, Tyler launched a smear campaign on social media, posting libelous stories on neighborhood Facebook groups and next-door forums about my questionable military background, and a fabricated history of financial exploitation. In his narrative, Walter was a confused elderly man being cruelly manipulated by his greedy, domineering granddaughter. To cap it all off, the HOA scheduled an emergency auction of Walter's house for the following Friday, claiming the imminent health hazards required immediate resolution. Margot's real estate company would naturally be handling the sale and had already pre-qualified a list of interested buyers, but every move they made had been anticipated, documented, and counted. I allowed Margot to believe. Her restraining order had neutralized me. I ceased all direct contact and worked exclusively through my attorney, Marcus Webb, maintaining the public appearance of compliance. We moved Walter to a comfortable temporary assisted living facility, a strategic choice that removed him from the immediate conflict zone while ensuring his safety. The antiseptic smell of the facility couldn't mask Walter's heartbreak as he packed a small overnight bag. "Alex," he said, his voice heavy with defeat, "maybe I should just sell the house. I'm so tired of fighting." "Grandpa, this isn't a retreat. It's a strategic repositioning," I told him, using the military jargon he understood. "We're not fighting anymore. We're finishing this. And when it's over, you are going home to your garden." Evelyn Patterson became my eyes and ears, attending HOA meetings and reporting every detail of Margot's increasingly erratic behavior. Pressure was clearly getting to her. Evelyn reported that Margot had started drinking during the day and was making wild accusations in public about outside agitators and criminal conspiracies against her. Detective Ray used the time to finalize the arrest warrants and coordinate with federal investigators. The case had officially crossed state lines as Tyler's malware network had been discovered in senior communities in 2 neighboring states. making it a federal cybercrime investigation. Marcus completed the massive civil asset forfeiture paperwork and the class action lawsuit documentation. 47 plaintiffs, detailed financial records, and a crystal-clear pattern of organized criminal activity. The case was airtight. Jennifer Santos prepared her explosive investigative report, with camera crews on standby, ready to roll the moment the arrests were made. The story would be timed to air on the evening news, maximizing public awareness and serving as a warning to other potential victims. My final evidence package was a masterpiece of digital forensics, bank records, malware analysis, wiretap conversations, video surveillance, and documented proof of coordination between all the players. Tyler and Margot had unwittingly provided enough evidence to convict themselves twice over. But the piece de resistance was yet to come. Margot, drunk on her perceived victory, was planning a celebration at the upcoming annual HOA meeting. She intended to announce the successful removal of problem residents and unveil her grand plans for the neighborhood's upgrades. She had no idea she was about to be the guest of honor at her own takedown. Knowledge tip 7. Frivolous or malicious restraining orders can be challenged and defeated with proper legal representation and evidence. In fact, false allegations of elder abuse can dramatically strengthen your position when the real abuse is thoroughly documented. Friday morning arrived with the crisp promise of autumn justice and the sweet, delicious anticipation of watching bullies get exactly what they deserve. The Willow Creek Estates Community Center had never seen a crowd like this. Word had spread like wildfire about the HOA's emergency meeting to discuss the foreclosure. Residents, both old and new, packed the rows of folding chairs while Jennifer Santos's local news crews quietly set up their cameras in the back of the room. Margot Blackwood stood at the podium, resplendent in a crimson power suit, her blonde hair perfectly coiffed. She radiated the smug confidence of a conqueror who believed she had already won the war. She had charts and graphs, projecting property value improvements, and PowerPoint slides, detailing her successful community management initiatives. Ladies and gentlemen, neighbors, Margot announced, her voice ringing with satisfaction. I am so pleased to report the successful removal of several problem properties that we're dragging down our community standards and property values. Today marks a glorious new chapter for Willow Creek Estates. The flash of camera bulbs illuminated her triumphant smile as she clicked to a slide, showing an architectural rendering of a new modern duplex on the lot where Walter's house currently stood. That's when I walked through the front door. I wasn't alone. I was flanked by Detective Ray Kowalski on one side and 2 uniformed federal agents on the other. Jennifer Santos's camera crews swung around to capture our entrance. A collective gasp swept through the room. The murmur of the shocked crowd mixed with the whir of camera motors as every head turned toward us. Margot single quotes. His confident smile faltered when she saw me, then completely evaporated when she spotted Detective Ray's badge and the federal agents behind him. Margaret Blackwood. Ray's voice boomed with the unmistakable authority of 15 years in law enforcement. You are under arrest for violations of the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, and felony elder abuse. Tyler, who had been sitting in the front row, tried to bolt for a side exit, but found his path blocked by 2 more agents who had been waiting for exactly that move. The sharp metallic click of handcuffs, snapping shut, echoed through the suddenly silent room. But first, I said, walking calmly to the front of the room as Ray read a stunned Margot her Miranda rights. Let me show this community what's really been going on in Willow Creek Estates. I connected my laptop to the projector. The image of the new duplex was replaced by irrefutable evidence. Bank records showing $380,000 Stolen from 47 elderly residents. Screenshots of Tyler's keylogging malware capturing passwords in real time. And the crown jewel audio recordings of Margot on the phone with a potential buyer discussing her strategy of cleaning out the old folks to make room for more profitable property. The HOA was never about community standards. I announced to the packed room and the rolling cameras. It was a criminal enterprise, a front organization, designed to systematically defraud elderly residents and steal their homes. Evelyn Patterson stood up in the front row, her voice carrying the clear, commanding authority of a beloved school teacher. I have personally documented every fraudulent fine, every act of harassment, and every intimidation tactic for the last 6 months. 47 of our neighbors were victims of this organized crime operation. Margot's complete and total breakdown was captured in high definition for the evening news. She screamed about conspiracies, political persecution, and outside agitators. Her carefully constructed facade of suburban elegance crumbled into raw, ugly desperation. "You want to talk about property values?" I asked the crowd as a weeping Tyler was led away in handcuffs. "They're about to go up significantly because this community just proved that bullies, thieves, and predators don't belong in Willow Creek Estates." The mic drop moment came when Detective Ray took the podium again to announce the recovery of the stolen funds. Thanks to the detailed financial forensics in this case, we have traced and frozen over $380,000 in stolen assets under federal RICO statutes. These funds, plus significant additional damages, will be returned to the victims of this scheme. The sound of spontaneous, thunderous applause filled the room, mixing with the click of camera shutters, as residents realized their long nightmare was finally over. But the best moment of all came when my grandfather, Walter Miller, walked slowly, but steadily through the front door. He had insisted on being here, leaving his assisted living exile for this moment. The entire room rose to its feet, giving him a standing ovation as he made his way to the front. He took the microphone, his voice stronger and clearer than I'd heard it in months. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, looking out at the faces of his neighbors, "this is what happens when a community stands together against bullies. And this," he said, turning to wink at me, "is what happens when my granddaughter gets mad." 6 months later, Willow Creek Estates felt like a completely different neighborhood, not because of forced aesthetic conformity or HOA harassment, but because people were actually talking to each other again. A genuine sense of community had been forged in the fire of shared adversity. Margot and Tyler were each sentenced to 5 years in federal prison with full restitution ordered. The HOA was formally dissolved by a state judge, and all its fraudulent fines and liens were declared null and void. The 12 homes that had been improperly seized or sold under duress were, through a complex but successful legal battle led by Marcus Webb, returned to their rightful owners or their families. Walter came home from his temporary residence to find the entire neighborhood had organized a massive welcome home block party. The street was closed off, and the air once thick with tension now smelled of barbecue smoke and freshly baked cookies. It was a joyous, cathartic celebration that lasted long past midnight, filled with the sounds of children's laughter and neighbors reconnecting. Evelyn Patterson was unanimously elected president of the newly formed and entirely voluntary Willow Creek Community Association. She accepted the position on one condition: that all meetings must include coffee and her famous homemade oatmeal raisin cookies. Her first initiative was to establish a senior watch program, not to look for burglars, but to educate residents on how to spot and report the kinds of scams that had targeted them. Walter's garden became his masterpiece that summer. Neighbors, new and old, stopped by daily, not to complain, but to admire his magnificent tomatoes, to ask for gardening tips, and simply to listen to his stories about the old days. He started a small kids' corner in the garden, teaching the neighborhood children the magic of growing their own food. The sound of their laughter as they pulled up their first carrots became the new soundtrack of the neighborhood. I decided to stay in Willow Creek for good. I resigned my commission and started a local cybersecurity consulting business, specializing in protecting seniors from digital fraud. The demand was overwhelming. It turned out that Tyler and Margot's operation was just one tentacle of a much larger network of elder fraud in the region. Detective Ray and I discovered that our professional partnership translated remarkably well to our personal lives. He proposed to me one perfect Sunday morning right there, in the middle of Walter's garden, with the sweet smell of blooming tomato plants in the air, and the sound of distant church bells carrying on the breeze. But the real lasting victory was the community initiative that grew out of our ordeal. We established Walter's Warriors, a non-profit organization that provides free technology support, software installation, and fraud protection education for elderly residents throughout the county. We partnered with local banks, law enforcement agencies, and senior centers to create a model program that has since been adopted by communities in 3 neighboring states. The annual Walterton Community Festival, held every September in the local park, now draws hundreds of families. It's a celebration not just of our victory over corruption, but of the resilient power of neighbors looking out for one another. We also established a scholarship fund in my grandfather's name. It sends 2 local high school graduates to cybersecurity programs each year, with one simple requirement, that they spend their summers volunteering their time to teach digital safety skills to senior citizens. It's a beautiful, self-sustaining cycle, protecting the generation that built our communities, while training the next generation to defend against future threats. Evelyn's weekly Scam Alert email newsletter has become required reading for thousands of seniors across the county, featuring real-world examples of recent fraud attempts and simple, step-by-step instructions for protecting personal information. Last week, I got a call from a community in Oregon. They were facing an eerily similar pattern of HOA harassment targeting their elderly residents. They had seen Jennifer Santos's award-winning news report online and were hoping I could help. I'm flying out next month to help them build their own defense strategy. Walter's morning walks are now a neighborhood institution. The familiar crunch of leaves under his boots signals the start of each new day. His wheelchair ramp, the one Margot tried so desperately to tear down, has been joined by 3 others on our street, as our community has come to embrace accessibility instead of hiding from it. My favorite moment of each day comes in the evening, when Walter sits on that ramp watching the sunset and waving to neighbors walking their dogs. The sound of his contented sigh mixes with the gentle evening breeze rustling through the leaves of his vegetable garden. The garden that started this whole fight and ended up saving an entire community. You know what I really learned from all this, Alex? Walter asked me last night as we sat together watching fireflies dance around his tomato plants. Sometimes the best way to protect what you love is to be willing to fight for it. And sometimes the most important part of the fight is just remembering you're not fighting alone. The scent of fresh basil and the distant sound of kids playing kickball in the street reminded me why this victory was so profound. It wasn't just about stopping fraud or recovering money. It was about proving that ordinary people, united in purpose, can defend themselves and their community. So here's my challenge to everyone reading this. If you have an HOA nightmare story, share it. Drop it in the comments. Detail the tactics, name the strategies, and let other people know what to watch out for. Every story shared is another family armed with the knowledge to protect themselves. And if this story helped you, hit that subscribe button. I have more cases to share, more lessons to teach, because the unfortunate truth is that bullies and predators count on good people being too intimidated, too isolated, or too overwhelmed to fight back. But when a community stands together, armed with knowledge and determination, those bullies discover they've picked the wrong neighborhood to terrorize. Now go check on your elderly neighbors. Help them update their computer security. And most importantly, make sure they know they are not fighting alone.